Hi guys, so this is mine and Jasper's first episode together, and what we talk about here is something close to Jasper's heart, which is how you can improve your performance at Olympic weightlifting. And we kind of explore the different qualities that you need to improve, as well as the specific technical angles. There's a lot of quite applicable stuff here, things that you can actually directly use in your training, looking at where you're at, and other subjects like how to find a good coach. And should you really be focusing on technical stuff or improving your confidence in lifting? But overall, it is a nice little discussion towards the end where we're looking at, actually, for a lot of things, it's not so much about the sport specific, but it's actually rather about the general qualities that we're training. So hope you enjoy and hope it helps you with your Olympic weightlifting journey.
Welcome to Real Coaching Radio, the podcast for coaches by coaches. We are here to teach you how to get the most out of your clients and yourself. This is where beauty meets the beast, brains meet brawn, and science meets, well, bro science. Welcome to Real Coaching Radio.
Alright guys, so bit of change of scenery today. We've got me and Jasper on the podcast. I'm going to approach a topic close to Jasper's heart, which is how to improve performance for Olympic weightlifting. So, Jasper, what are the main tenets that you think you need to improve, maybe the qualities you need to improve for Olympic weightlifting that people should be focused on from the start?
Patience. It's a long game. The overall, learning to snatch and clean and jerk on the face, it looks very technical. To get to a basic level, you could take most people off the street and get them to do some form of maybe a hang power snatch fairly quickly. Similar with a clean and jerk variation. But then when you get into the point of you can do the basic lift, but you're now trying to get good at it, you get into this difficult phase of we're trying to change one tiny thing, how your angle is at this point of the lift that is affecting you for this, that for most people takes ages. The guys that are at world level, they've been lifting for 15 years. So it's similar to most skills. It's like that, not that it's necessarily true, that 10,000 hour rule of you just have to put in the work, but it's got to be focused practice work.
So when you say the first bit, you can fairly quickly get anyone off the street to get to a standard where they could do a hang or a power. How long do you think you could go from beginner to a decent basic first step to be able to do the basic movement? How long do you think that would take, and what kind of process would that look like?
If you're looking at once a week, or maybe twice a week, 3 to 6 months, but that's such a an individual process of how well someone's understanding is. So I'm sure if someone was looking at my weightlifting, they'd maybe have a different opinion, but coming from a gymnastics background, having done a lot of high skill movements that require a lot of cognitive processing, I felt I picked up the understanding fairly fast. I mean, I think this is a good point to bring it up. I've only been Olympic lifting for 3 years, myself, and only coaching for a year and a half. So, I love the sport and I'm so passionate about it, but I'm not disillusioned to the fact that, what we're going to talk about today, I'm going to look back on in 2 years and be like, man, that guy knows nothing. Yeah. So this is obviously just my interpretation of where I am at this point. It's an individual journey of how fast you can pick things up and how quickly someone can make those changes.
Do you think there's anything, if you were from scratch beginner, is there anything people should be focusing on primarily to make that journey as efficient, or we won't say as quick because you just said patience, so quick isn't the right word, but as efficient or as effective as possible? So is there anything they should be doing, and how many times a week? So if we automatically presume they're going to be training weightlifting. So they're going to be doing that because that's what they want to achieve to improve their performance at weightlifting. But outside of just the concept of them training weightlifting, what should they be doing? How many times a week should they be doing it to get the best results initially for that start period, and then we'll go on as we hit to the intermediate stage?
Yeah, so if we go off the premise that they are being coached and they're not just going in and doing it by themselves,
yeah,
I would try and get them, if let's say they're doing twice a week, to snatch and clean of some variation.
Yep.
In do both lifts each session.
Both
so
sessions,
they're doing
snatch and clean
twice a week, to the point that there are things coming to your attention as a coach, i.e. weaknesses. Let's say, their technique of the pull is incorrect, their overhead stability is not quite right, because a lot of people, similar for like strength movements, like if no one's ever squatted before, if they just start squatting, they're going to get better and better and better until areas of weakness or mobility come into factor that then needs to be worked on separately. So doing snatch and clean and jerk twice a week.
And is that full snatch, or is there a specific variation you would choose for beginners to start with? So let's say we're talking about the first 6 weeks. Are we literally looking at them doing a snatch from the floor?
No, definitely not a snatch from the floor, because that first pull is what kind of catches everyone out, even for myself and you when we've done Olympic lifting. If the first pull's not right, you're going to be on your toes or fall backwards, or just it just messes you up when you come past the knees if it's not quite right. So definitely from the hang for probably both, and then it's a little bit down to the lifter in terms of their confidence and stuff. Like most people can manage to do like hang cleans fairly quickly because having the bar caught in that front rack position is easier to understand and feel a bit safer, whereas throwing yourself under a barbell to catch an overhead squat is a little bit daunting. So hang powers are a great way to find people's like starting limit. So for instance, I've just started working with this lady and she's very strong, and we've just been doing like some hang power snatches, and I think she's already gone over what she could previously lift for a, in quotations, full snatch. Obviously that's dependent on people's depth, purely because with removing the element of the complexity and the fear of going under the bar and just focusing on how she's extending and the bar path itself into that power position, she can actually move more weight than she thought she could. Yeah, because
it's a more efficient pattern.
And once we've got to that point, when we're looking at twice a week sessions of snatch and clean and jerk for both, already we're getting to the point where an obvious weakness for this person is their ability to overhead squat, because we did a little bit of like behind the neck press in our snatch grip into, I think it was an overhead squat off the top of my head, and we were looking at 25 kilos rather than she's power snatched like 35-40 kilos.
Right. And is that because of any particular reason? Like, is it a strength problem? Is it a mobility problem? Like, when you're obviously, the weightlifting is a skill that you're developing, and that's going to take time to improve that skill and develop. But is there other qualities that people should be improving at the same time? So for example, is the fact that she can't overhead squat, is that because she needs to get stronger, or is it because she needs to get more mobile? Is there other things people should be focusing on around it in that initial period?
Combination of things. Like, if we are taking someone off the street to start Olympic lifting, then they probably need to be doing some form of squatting as well.
Yeah.
Just to learn that motion, whether it's front squat, back squat. It's a very controlled, not static, but it's not a like dynamic motion necessarily.
Yeah.
The bar's attached to you the whole time, it's down and up. But for this individual, I think it's partly, it's a new skill. If you've not done a lot of overhead squatting, it is a different movement to the snatch itself, because the bar is overhead and you're just, similar to a back squat, trying to control this thing that is attached to you rather than catching something that's looping over the top. So part of that is why I reckon you should, either for yourself training or coaching, is start with just the two movements, progress as far as you can, because we're going to have to spend a little bit of time working on her skill of overhead squatting before we can start implementing weight to be effective to get her stronger overhead, more stable overhead.
Okay, so you think the skill development initially is the primary focus, like that's what people should, if they're brand new to weightlifting, they should be working on the skill development.
100%.
Okay.
We were talking, or I was listening to a podcast or something, and everything was to do with the conjugate stuff we were looking at, and the variations of Olympic lifts. They've got like 200 or something different pulls, overhead squats, complexes, that sort of thing. So there's so much you can train later down the line to elicit certain responses and train specific elements. But overall, it is just a snatch and a clean and jerk.
So then the only question becomes, what if you have a beginner that comes off the street who can't put a bar over their head? They just can't get in that position. Or they're literally not strong enough to have a bar overhead. So in that sense, how would they get to the point where they can even do the skill of snatching and clean and jerking when they can't even hold a 15 kilo bar over their head?
So some of that would be just like GPP, like general physical preparedness, getting people to a point that they can hold a 15 kilo or 20 kilo bar overhead. But also, along with, if it's an immobility, then it's kind of working on like stretching, moving through those ranges of motion. You can do a lot of skill work with a PVC pipe to at least learn. It's never the same, because having nothing to like make contact with doesn't feel right compared to when you're holding a bar in your hands. But you can at least teach them the understanding of where you're moving through positions, how the bar should be moving around you, i.e. for the snatch or the jerk, let's say. But it would just be a case of assessing what they can and can't do, because if it's just an overhead tightness or weakness, there's no reason you couldn't spend time working from the floor on their snatch pull positions whilst improving their overhead mobility, that sort of thing.
So let's make it as applicable as possible to someone listening who wants to start weightlifting, and we'll use that example of someone who is totally new and they can't hold that bar overhead at the moment. It's a mixture of they're not strong enough and they're not mobile enough. What would an example week to help them get stronger, start learning the skill pattern, and get more mobile look like? Let's say like a 3-day a week. How would you program them?
Obviously, without knowing the person, I know we've got this little avatar idea.
Just based on those pieces of information about them. So they're not mobile enough to hold that position overhead, and at the moment they're not quite strong enough to hold a 20 kilo bar. What was like a sample day for 3 days that you would put them through to get them into that right positions?
So one of the, let's go, I'm not going to go in any particular order just because of how people's weeks might be. One of the days would want to be as close to an Olympic lifting session as possible. So whether they can clean but they can't jerk because their overhead strength's not good enough. So some form of clean, some form of potentially snatch positional drills, or even, like we talked about, people can use PVC pipe. So moving through positions, holding a PVC pipe overhead in that overhead squat position, potentially even doing overhead squats with just a PVC pipe.
PVC,
just increase that range of motion. It is worth noting that those sessions, you might not feel like you're working, so it's not a workout, it is a skill session. You're there to improve your learning and your ability, not your strength or your speed or muscle size. So it will be light weights, just looking at technique. Second day would probably be focused on some sort of overhead strength, general upper body strength, like push-pull, a little bit more of that like GPP side of things. So not necessarily at all specific to weightlifting, but more trying to eliminate any overhead weaknesses, immobility, just general stability overhead. So, using dumbbells, kettlebells, don't even need to use a barbell, or even just body weight movements. And then probably the third day would be some form of lower body strength. So whether that's, specific to weightlifting, so some heavier clean pulls, some front squats, some back squats, or even just general strength, lower body stuff. That sort of thing.
Cool. Nice. That's pretty good.
On that, of like what I would recommend to people coming into lift, because it is so technical. Well, it is so technical, but it is the 21st century. We have so much resources and knowledge just out there on the internet. Like, everyone puts on social media, here's how to snatch, here's how to do this and that. So I would definitely recommend 2 things. Either get yourself a coach that knows what they're doing. If you're not somewhere where they teach Olympic weightlifting, or you can find someone you want to work with, we'll come back and look at like finding a coach. Then I would recommend trying to educate yourself. You know, there's books out there, like Greg Everett has a book out. He's also got like numerous stuff on his
ridiculous amount of resources,
like website and Instagram.
Yeah.
I think it's like Catalyst Athletic, of tutorials and stuff. But also likewise, it's out there everywhere. You just Google on YouTube how to snatch, how to clean and jerk. Go and watch that, get a basic understanding.
Yeah.
And then I'm a big advocate for filming yourself, because the perception of how you think something feels to how it looks will be very different.
So from every set, so this is where, you know, if I'm from a completely beginner stance, like I totally see the value when I'm filming my lifts. It's because I know what I'm looking for to improve my technique and my performance on a lift. But when you're a complete beginner, you know, it's hard necessarily to see what you should be doing instead. So I think filming the lifts is like pretty much the absolute standard. You should, especially if you're doing a skill, you should be filming them all the time. One, so you can see the progression, and two, so you can literally compare it to other lifters who are lifting it correctly, or looking at the way they move and be like, okay, I'm not moving like that. But it's quite hard. You know, I've definitely found it quite hard to make the connection between, like you said, how it feels and how I'm actually doing it. So sometimes you might feel, especially if you're quite immobile, you might feel like you're in a really good upright position, or you're in a really nice position, and then you look at the video and you're actually really tight and you're like in this terrible position. But I think that's why the most important part of that is you really do need a coach if you're really looking to take it seriously as soon as possible. You will just skip so much of a step if you are able to have a coach who is able to look at those videos and actually tell you and explain to you what you should be looking for and what's important. So yeah, definitely coaching or classes seems to me to be like, at the start, that's definitely where you should be at. Now, obviously, there's like a resource element. Like, not everyone has access to that. So all those free resources that you were talking about, like Greg Everett and Max Aita and stuff like that, who have like step-by-step tutorials, are probably a really good way to go. And now, obviously, you have, for the programming-wise, coach is always the best possible option, because they're going to make it specific to you. They're going to look at your specific problems. But now we do have the magic of the internet, and we have AI programming. So Max Aita and what's his face,
Seb Ostrovich, I think I'm butchering his last name, but from Weightlifting House.
From Weightlifting House have made an app to program that kind of generates a program for you, kind of specifically, and follows with your progress. So that's quite a good place to start if you don't have access to something like a coach initially. That might be a monetary reason for that, but obviously classes or coaching would be the number one. Yeah.
And finding a coach is difficult, because you need to find someone that not only you think is a good coach, that actually has the knowledge that you're looking for, because I'm sure there's quite a few PTs out there that will want to teach Olympic weightlifting, but probably haven't gone to do an Olympic weightlifting course. And I mean, I'm a big believer that I'm sure there's quite a few high-level weightlifters out there that teach weightlifting that don't have any qualifications. But if you spent 10 years training it, working with a coach, the amount of knowledge you pick up is insane. Like, you know, my background's trampolining and bits, and you have to do qualifications to teach it, which I found really frustrating, because, you know, I've been doing that sport for almost 10 years.
Since you were a wee lad.
Exactly, yeah. And, you know, I'd understand how you do all the like multi-twisting doubles, and we go sit on this coaching course where you're like, right, this is how you do a back somersault. And it's like, oh,
forward roll.
Yeah, and, you know, you have to have that piece of paper for the qualification and the insurance to teach it. But it's not necessarily that important compared to the experience a coach might have.
I totally
when
agree.
You're looking to find someone to work with.
I think, you know, this is something actually me and Mark have talked about a lot, but it's just like a general observation of coaching in general, is that, you know, not to piss on his parade, but it's pretty easy to get a PT qualification. It's pretty easy.
Yeah.
Like, you essentially pay for a course and you follow it, you know, at a fairly rudimentary level through to the point where you have a qualification. And even at that point, you know, you're not insured or protected against anything, and no one's checking on you to see how good a coach you are. No one is going and being like, do you have the requisite experience and knowledge to teach this kind of class? And I think because it's such an unmanaged situation, it's kind of like the same as like the health supplement industry as well. So you can basically make anything, and to a point, if there's any amount of data, you can be like, oh, this thing does this, and you can sell it as, this is an energy boosting whatever, and it's like iron or vitamin D, and it's just like, well, that's just a vitamin that you might be deficient in. But I think it's the same with coaching, especially with these more high skill stuff. It's way more difficult because you don't necessarily get that from sitting and watching YouTube videos. You don't necessarily get that. You do get it from experience, and especially experience around coaches. Doesn't necessarily mean, like Jasper, you need to be coaching someone, but you definitely need to be around people coaching so you can see how they coach, what they're looking for, and if you're not around that, then you really shouldn't be teaching Olympic weightlifting. But that's the problem. There is no system to analyze that. So looking for a coach, definitely agree. You should definitely be looking at how knowledgeable are they, look at the kind of athletes that they have kind of produced. It doesn't mean they necessarily need to be like making competitive famous athletes, but like, have they consistently got people from square one to however far into the
100%.
process?
Yeah, you might be the best person in your area at taking from someone who's never lifted to a point where they can fully understand and do snatch and clean and jerk and all the variations, but either you're not interested or experienced to get them to a competition level. Doesn't mean you're not a great coach. Just means that is your area of expertise. And obviously there's ways to progress onto that. You know, if you're looking to take people to competition, you kind of just have to take the plunge and take someone and experience it, or go and find someone who already does that, i.e. like a mentor,
or you need to compete. That's the other thing.
A little bit,
like if you haven't been to a competition, I think there is a massive gap in how the skill set for training in a gym and competing at a comp looks like. And you can totally, like, this was my experience with powerlifting competitions, you could be like so on it in a gym, and it's in your environment, you're in your own element, you've got your own music, whatever it is, you know, you can drink and eat whenever you like, you can go there with full sleep. You go into a comp and you're underslept, you know, there's certain commands, there's certain etiquette, like all these things, and it can completely throw you off, especially with the lights and people in front of you, and it's almost a performance. So as a coach, if you haven't experienced that, it's so hard to then go in and show someone how to do that well, because probably you're going to feel pretty anxious and pretty like overwhelmed by the whole situation,
which
like,
your athletes will pick up on and stuff.
Exactly.
If you're not sure what's going on, especially for weightlifting comps where, you know, you can change your total, so you can change your entry weights and bits, and you know, you've got to be aware of if so and so goes up by a couple of kilos, your athlete moves up the chain. So you know, you need to know what's going on, and this is something that I need to go and do myself at some point, either compete or go to a competition, either you know, as a helper or with someone to kind of experience it, because it is very different. Like, you know, you're going to experience a lot of the same emotions and feelings from general competition, but there are like specific details, I'm sure, for like powerlifting and weightlifting that are different, even though it's a very similar sport, that you need to be aware of as a coach. Yeah,
for sure. Nice. I mean, so how do you think is the best way to find, let's say, a good coach for you? Like, what, let's just say a couple of things that you think are things you should really look out for / are a good way to find a good coach.
Ignoring, you know, location and bits, because, you know, CrossFit's doing a great thing for Olympic weightlifting, bringing it a bit more to the public rather than just being like in a dungy garage or gym just working out with someone. So CrossFit gyms are a great community space to find weightlifting, and the standard and technique within CrossFit is getting way better, unlike what it used to be when people used to get ragged on for doing CrossFit because it's all crap technique and that sort of thing. So that's probably the like most like global, a bit like a pure gym kind of a weightlifting, you know, you're going to find it in most accessible
CrossFit.
Most accessible. But doesn't mean you won't find great coaches in there. You just need to go in and just, you know, be switched on to, you know, everyone is trying to sell you something, unfortunately, you know, me and Chris do the same. You know, we're
It
trying
is
to
our
offer
business.
a service. It is a business, yeah. So just be aware of that the, you know, flashiest coach, the one with the best sales technique, might not be the one for you. They might just be the person that has the gift of the gab.
Yeah, dare I say it, as I am a very loud person, and I do talk a lot of shit, probably the most in your face, the most trying to get your business, is probably not the best person there. It's probably the person that is most sure of themselves in what they're doing, and then they wouldn't necessarily need to be like pining for your business, but also just like, never believe someone that is 100% sure of themselves and is telling you, yeah, I can get you anything you want, give you anything you want. They're going to be like, well, depending on this circumstance, because ultimately, especially with a coach, and this is what, as a coach now, you know, I'm sure Jasper agrees, it is a relationship. So, you know, there's several elements. You have to get on with them. You just have to get on with them. You have to be able to be pretty friendly with them, and they have to be able to get the best out of you in whatever situation it is. That might be really motivating you, that might be disciplining you, and some people like prefer that kind of style thing. It might just, you know, being supportive, you know, almost like a friend that is there helping you do fitness. So that is, you know, that's one element. So yeah, I do really think like the character is important, but it's also based on that relationship is what you bring into it, because ultimately if you're coming in half-hearted, you know, someone can say they're going to sell you the world, but if you're not putting the best that you can into it, you're still not going to get that results. It doesn't actually matter how good the coach is. So in some ways, knowledge is at least the second most important thing, but probably the relationship is like a key part to you getting in the gym.
Yeah, 100%. You know, if take this CrossFit gym that we're kind of using as our scenario where you'd find someone, let's say the 3 coaches that work there all probably have a very similar knowledge base, maybe some more experienced than others, of weightlifting, but you need to go and find the person that works best for you, that you have that relationship with, and that their like coaching style works best for you. This is the one thing I found, like I've never really had a coach for weightlifting. Like it's all been kind of self-taught by like filming and watching stuff, and then, you know, selfishly, well, not even selfishly, but you know, the first reason I did an Olympic weightlifting course was to get more knowledge about it, to sort of coach myself, and then enjoyed that process and started coaching like other people. So you need to find someone that works well with you, because when I've, you know, had help from people over the like couple of years, I've definitely found that some people's way of communicating with me worked better than others. You know, having been a competitor in other sports, I prefer much more of like a democratic like coaching style, where it's like, what do you think of this? We're going to work on this today. Does that feel alright? Rather than just being like, this is what you're doing, much more like autocratic, like this is what you're doing. This is
the right way to do it.
Can't ask questions, can't do this, because especially with such like a, you know, a skill sport, I mean, even with anything, like, you know, even if we're just talking running, I'm like, right, we're going to go run 400 meters. This time, this pace, this rest. You'd be like, why? If your coach can't tell you that, or gets offended when you ask, as if you're questioning their knowledge or opinion, it's like potentially that's not the person for you, unless, you know, like we spoke about, you know, you want that discipline where it's like, you're going to turn up and do what I tell you to, and then you're going to leave and it will be great, and you want someone to be that strict with you, then that's obviously personal preference, and you need to find someone who fits into that coaching style that you like.
It could just be where you're at in your journey as well, because often somewhere around the start you're trying to understand what you're doing. You're trying to understand, why am I doing this? Why do I perform the movement like this? Why do I need my hip at this angle? Why do I need my back like this? And later on, when you're like Lasher, you know what I mean, when you're a world champion, it's probably that you need someone to tell you what to fucking do, and you just do it and know that there's a result at the end, that you're just trusting the process. And I know a lot of competitors who much prefer you just tell me what to do, and I do it, and then I perform when I need to perform. But early on, you know, I think explaining, even if you don't understand, is such an important part of you learning. Like for me, like when we've done sessions, just constantly understanding, like, but why are you telling me to do it like this? Or why are we choosing this complex for this day? Or, okay, so that's good. So we've kind of spoken about beginner. We've spoken about getting a coach,
Yeah.
which is probably one of our primary recommendations anyway. You know, like we said, obviously we're coaches and it's a business and everyone's trying to sell you something.
Come down to Origin Athletics.
Yeah, exactly. But what is really valuable about a coach is, you know, the journey is long, like Jasper said, and it requires patience, and having someone to constantly support you and guide you in the right direction, one, keeps you consistent, which is hugely valuable because it's probably one of the main reasons people fail is lack of consistency. They just give up or they don't do things. You know, it's that forever intermediate stage where they're just doing the same things for years and not really making progress. They've made their newbie gains, they've got the initial spark, and they're like, why am I not making any progress? Because you haven't got someone to guide you in the right direction. So yeah, the coaching aspect, spoken about beginner stuff. So if someone's a bit more intermediate, you know, they can like use me as an example. So they can snatch and they can clean and jerk. So, you know, at a basic level, how would their training, or what kind of things should they be focusing on now, in your opinion, and like what might their training week look like? So, you know, we can use me an example because we can know, like, if anyone who's seen me weightlifting, one of my main problems is I can power snatch as much as I can snatch, which to any coach is very aggravating because it basically means that I'm limiting the potential I can. So for example, with that, we're working on the 1% kind of things you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
So those little specific changes, but like, how would a training week look if you would try to improve my technique now, and what things should I be focusing on?
So we've spoken about, you know, bits to improve, and the training method we're doing at the moment, where we're like changing this format of the lifts each week on this kind of like conjugate style, does make that slightly harder. And, you know, we've spoken briefly about maybe having just like a technique day where it's like similar stuff each time. For you, it's potentially a lack of understanding between the extension and the drop. A little bit of mobility, which is always a little bit of an argument we have about how flexible your body is. And then spending more time, like we would on this extra weightlifting day, having more time doing like snatch, balance, overhead squat to get comfortable underneath that position. But I think the overall thing it comes down to is your understanding of what's meant to be happening and the confidence to do that. Which is, it's very easy to talk about like how to change things, but, you know, as we've discovered from doing some bits together, it's like a very personalized journey to achieve those things.
So like, how many times for me to, at this stage where I'm at, how many times would I need to be training a week in Olympic weightlifting to improve, would you recommend to the average person? So if you're at an intermediate stage, you know, you can snatch, hand, clean, jerk to depth, but you've kind of not consistent, you know, you're power snatching more than you, when it gets heavy, than you're actually snatching, or the same.
Solely for weightlifting, you know, you could be doing 4 to 5 times a week of, you know, squats, full lifts, variations, accessories, that kind of thing. You know, for you, the structure of how we're training, where we do a heavy session and a fast session for weightlifting, likewise with strength and velocity for like compound lifts, it's probably better for you to, I mean, it's easy when we're busy and trying to fit training in to say, to have either that extra session we spoke about where you just have, you know, it's going to be some snatch balances, some light snatches where the sole focus is like getting under the bar rather than what you're lifting. But then it does come down to how you're approaching that lift, and like your recent PB, like you snatched like 80 kilos or something, but power snatched it, or 82 or something.
I did power snatch.
And up to, you know, we got to, when you were going up, you got like maybe like 70, 75 as full snatches, and then something switches where you're like unsure.
It's heavy, Jasper, that's what switches.
But is it, you know, for a man that can bench 130 for reps and back squat 150 or whatever,
just lie down and press it in front of you. Nothing's flying in the air. Nothing
so that's
can land on my head.
You know, so what I'd recommend for an intermediate lifter that is at a point where they can do the lifts, but either they power stuff when it gets like heavy rather than cleaning it full, or, you know, very common one for weightlifting is they'll do a pull, either clean or snatch, to do the lift. and they'll hit it hard and the bar comes up really high and they just freeze and they don't want to get under it.
Yeah.
If you're at that point, it's a difficult thing to get past, but it is entirely achievable. You need to work up to a weight. So, you know, take your 80 kilos. If you can hit 70 kilos as a full snatch, looks great, feels great. There's no difference between 70 and 72, really.
Yeah.
Not at all. So, you know, hit a couple at 70, really dial it in, go up to 72, hit that a couple more times, and then just move on.
Yeah.
Leave it there, great.
So you're saying basically like you should only be working to the point where you're actually hitting the weight with that correct movement pattern. So I guess it's the same as generally ego lifting, but like don't go to weights or don't carry on moving up in weights or hitting percentages where you are just power snatching it, because then you're learning the wrong pattern. You should be sticking at a weight where you can consistently full snatch.
Yes and no. If we change the, you know, idea of what we're looking at to, let's say we get to a point where you can pull it really high but you can't get under it.
Yeah.
Because the power snatch is more of like you're trying to catch it too soon rather than letting it come down on you.
Yeah.
But if we went over that and we went to, you know, me and you got very similar back squat.
Yeah.
You should easily be able to snatch 90 kilos.
Yeah.
But you probably couldn't power it. So they'd probably get to a point where you'd pull and nothing would happen.
Yeah.
You wouldn't get under it because you can't catch it in that power position. For that,
Sad times.
and let's say you don't have a power snatch issue, it's just you just can't get under it.
Yeah.
You know, and we've seen people that lift off the event we ran for like testing the lifts for our members. People would go to pull and it would come up crazy high,
like to their eye level.
Yeah, but because they're not used to that weight,
Yeah.
they're not confident to get under it. The thing I want them to focus on is, well, one, lifting a heavier percentage more often.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the time, especially in like weightlifting classes, you might, you know, take just a random number. You might have a 15 kilo bar with 2 5 kilo plates on either side, so that's 25 kilos.
Yeah.
And that's the weight you work at the whole session. But you actually then, we see people go to lift off that do not normally lift those weights.
Yeah.
Throwing like 50 kilos up.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's great that they hit that 50 kilos, but they need to go back into training and go, right, so I hit 50 kilos. It wasn't actually that hard, but it was a confidence thing. I need to now train at 40 kilos on the bar.
Yeah.
To build the confidence, how the weight feels in your hands. Because most people, if you can squat 60 kilos, let's say, you know, snatching a 25 kilo barbell is fairly easy.
Yeah.
And you need to be lifting a heavier weight to build that confidence to eventually conquer those heavier weights.
Yeah, so this is something actually just generally like we can bring in from our training method that we're using at the moment and how we choose to train is a big thing that we have noticed, that I've noticed in powerlifting a lot, Jasper's noticed in weightlifting, and we've just noticed it in general functional fitness stuff as well, so like cardio elements, is that people do not train heavy enough often enough. So they often, I mean, it sounds silly because you kind of think that a big problem in the gym is like men ego lifting and they do it with bad form and they grind out reps all the time. But actually, generally in the first year or so, most people are lifting like probably 60-70% each session and aren't really pushing themselves. So they, like Jasper said, aren't used to having that heavy load over their head or on their back or, you know, whatever it is. So when they go to do it, it just feels like their nervous system is just like, what the fuck is this? Why am I doing this? Like, I feel unsafe. I feel like something bad's going to happen. And this is your body's reaction to be like trying to keep you safe. But when you're pushing the weights a little bit more regularly and you feel a heavy weight in your hand more regularly, you're more confident to move with it, because what you realize is often with these kind of things is sensation doesn't necessarily align with how strong you are. You know, I'll often say to people when they're squatting, like, your feelings don't matter, the bar speed matters. How quickly that bar is moving up and down is indicative of how strong you are. If you are moving the bar really quickly, you are strong enough to move a heavier weight. However, if you're grinding the bar, that is too heavy, and you probably don't want to be grinding the weight really ever unless you're hitting like maxes or you're in a peak phase or something. But where there is a complicated relationship with weightlifting is people are often way stronger than they are technically skilled. So when they are throwing that weight over their head, like Jasper said, it's a technical problem or it's a confidence problem, and they actually are squatting probably more than 60 kilos. They're probably squatting 70, 80 kilos, and then they're snatching like 40, 50 kilos. And realistically, the main problem is the confidence or the technique. But if they're going off their true percentages and they're going off a 70 or 80%, they're actually training way too light for them, and they're never going to see that natural progression. That isn't to say you should be training heavy all the time. It just means there should be a balance of where you maybe are pushing the heavier weights or handling heavier weights often, and then you also have the technical sessions where we're focusing on that. And that's something we're like big advocates on for anything. Like the same is like if you're doing cardio, you know, you should be touching a max heart rate session pretty regularly. Like you should be going to a point where you're like really out of breath and really high heart rate under safe conditions. Obviously don't do this straight away, like have a bit of fitness first. But if you're regularly doing cardio and you're never touching a really high heart rate, you have no way to be like, this is hard, this is easy. Because if you're always going at like 70%, when it goes to 75%, you're like, God, that is really hard. But actually for you, 75% isn't really hard. You're just not used to it, so it just seems so much more. It's so much more intense. But when you've done a 95% max heart rate on a bike, and then you go to a 75% session, you feel a lot more like, oh, I have control over my breathing. I have control over my pace. So yeah, it's finding that balance. So
this is probably a perfect place to plug that me, Chris, and Mark have started building this Origin method programming.
Yeah. So if you are looking for a program that focuses on this kind of progression,
head over to Origin Method.
Yeah.
But within that, you know, that's what we've really enjoyed about this program we've been working on and been doing and practicing and like perfecting to release to the public, is that within a week's training, we hit a heavy lower body session, a heavy upper body piece, whether that's push pull, different variations. We have a heavy weightlifting day, but we also then have a velocity day, a weightlifting velocity / kind of
capacity
technique and capacity day where it's lighter weights, you're working on a specific skill. You hit a intense cardio piece
every week.
Around all of that, you have your accessories, your skill pieces, your less intense, just general fitness pieces. But it means that you are ready to kind of hit a heavy weight whenever you want. You know,
have the confidence.
You're not that confidence building. You're not disillusioned to the intensity you can train at, whether that's weight or cardio. Just a small plug there.
I mean, I think it's important on that note as well. This is probably something I'd like to ask you on weightlifting. So this is more of an opinion than a question, but I'll see what you think about it. I think lots of people who are, let's say, specifically looking to improve weightlifting are too specific too soon. That's my opinion. So
elaborate on that.
I was alluding to this earlier with the strength and mobility and whatever, right? Your ability to regularly train weightlifting is dependent on some key qualities. So those key qualities would be strength, your mobility, even though for me that's different from Jasper and what I think is important for mobility. We can have a little debate on that. That's good, actually. And in a way, your capacity, we'll call it fitness, but you said it better earlier, GPP, your general physical preparedness. And what this means is how many times can you do something without failing? You know, how fit is that muscle? How fit is your engine? I think if you can't put the bar over your head, you can't get into the right position, and you're getting really tired out in an hour session doing that. Weightlifting is the skill you should be focusing on, but the majority of your week should be spent on getting stronger, getting a bit fitter. That doesn't mean like constantly doing cardio, but you know, shout out to Charlie improving his cardio right now. Everyone should be doing cardio. Everyone should be improving their fitness. You are not in the top 1% yet. You will have interference, but it's at the moment is totally negligible. You're nowhere near a capacity. And the same with mobility. If you can't get into the position to weightlift, you do need to get improved mobility first to then train in those positions regularly. That is something that is
so
important.
Before we go on to that, a little bit of like backtrack to what we were talking about with hitting the correct weight for you and what that's going to do. I've had a couple of people, starting to work with me, and we were talking about goals for January 2023. Just the year goals, but like setting them within January to start on.
Yeah.
And the two people are kind of, they've done a little bit of strength training, but nothing that kind of gives them any base of like, I've got a PB, let's build from that.
Yeah.
And I have no clue for weightlifting. But weirdly, both of them, two different people, have back squatted 90 kilos for a triple.
Yeah.
Because that was where they were at in class-wise.
Yeah.
And it's the heaviest weight they've done. And I was saying to them, it's not a huge jump to presume that if you can back squat 90 kilos for a triple, that you could back squat 100 kilos for a triple.
Yeah.
Fairly good sort of like proportion of percentages. And a general guide that I like to use is you should be able to, with good technique, that's the limiting factor there, should be able to snatch 60% or 65%, depending how good you are and other things, of your back squat.
Yeah.
So for both those people, they should be able to snatch 60 kilos with good technique. And they're, at the moment looking at like 40 or 50 kilos or 35 kilos. And I was just saying to them, I was like, let's set the goal of, you've got this good level of strength where you're at.
Yeah.
Disproportionate to your Olympic lifts.
Yeah.
Let's set the goal of 60 kilos. Let's work on the technique over the strength and see if we can match that.
So bring it up
as just a goal. So on that, then I'm a big advocate of, whether it's right or wrong, you've just got to be careful with who you're doing it with and what stage of their journey they're at, is pushing people to make errors, obviously safely, with the weights they're lifting. So, take yourself, for instance, like we talked about with the power snatch, like your technique may look great at 60, 65 kilos. As soon as we go over 70, you start doing weird things in power snatching. Or people might look like, big one is, they might look like they're making hip contact or thigh contact in their lifts because they're lifting something so light that they can essentially do this like jump and pull and catch it in the front rack or overhead. But as soon as you get to a point where it's 40 or 50 kilos, getting a little bit heavier, something that they can't muscle their way through, it all breaks down, and you actually then need to take a step back and go, right, so actually now we've found what your issue is. It's not a confidence thing, it's not a mobility issue, it's the fact that your technique is just wrong, but you can hide it with light weights. So that was just like the final thing to kind of wrap up your improving in weightlifting, is give yourself a metric to aim for based off your strength numbers. And there's all sorts of conversion charts you can find. Likewise for cleans, a very rough guide is you should be able to clean what you can front squat for a triple.
Not yet.
So go after and get it. You know what I mean? Set it for a number, go chase it with good technique.
130.
Exactly, mate.
130. I'm at 110 at the moment, so there's a little bit of a jump. All right, so that's good.
GPP. Kind of all round.
The other qualities that lead to weightlifting.
We're going to use Joe,
right?
Who's a person that I train. It comes to gym, we all love Joe. He's like the little brother of everyone at the gym.
Little brother becoming bigger brother.
He's going to get big soon. Joe is a prime example of someone who has pretty good technique, but it doesn't match
mobility. Stupidly
ludicrous mobility. But it doesn't match his strength numbers. Some of that, so like, if you take his back squats like 120, clean is like, snatch is like 55, maybe 60 kilos. So he's not far off what he should be hitting. But when he does hit it, it looks like Bambi on ice because it's so unstable. And that potentially is due to maybe a little bit more overhead squat needed. But the big disproportion in his body is his lower body strength is vastly larger than his upper body strength. Part of that is the sport he actually does, which is trampolining. You don't need a huge upper body for it. But it does need to be stronger. So we've started putting in more upper body more consistently. So rather than just having an upper body day, at the end of his weightlifting days, he'll do some sort of upper body superset or complex, and that won't then affect him too much for his strength session the next day of like lower body, let's say. So trying to implement more of that.
I mean, so on that, you have to look like it. Obviously, like we're saying, every part of this is individual, and that's kind of like the caveat we'll always use. But there's pretty easy pretty easy guide to what you should be focusing on, whatever you're doing, including weightlifting, is if you can't physically do something, or you struggle to hold something in position, like it's hard to have that in position. Like for me, my overhead stability is just not good enough compared to
because you're too
my
tight.
lower body. So I have a mobility issue, according to Jasper. So I need to improve that to improve my weightlifting. I'm definitely physically strong enough because my push press is way larger than what I can snatch. I'm physically strong enough for my legs. I'm fit enough. I can do long sessions, and my technique's pretty good. Obviously, always improving. But one thing is that I feel uncomfortable in certain positions, and therefore that highlights to me that's what's holding me back. So what we're basically saying with this like GPP strength and mobility is wherever your weakness is what you should be doing. There's like a famous quote from Carl Jung, which is like, where your fear is where your path is. The thing you're afraid of doing, the thing that makes you uncomfortable, is where you should be following. And I think this is so good psychologically, but also for training. So for example, if you're finding like absolutely knackered when you're doing a complex that has multiple elements, you probably need to improve your fitness.
100%.
And that seems completely counterintuitive to weightlifting, but you probably need to improve your fitness before you can handle the load that requires, or the volume that requires for you to progress in weightlifting. Similarly, if you're Joe, if you know Bambi on ice, your upper body is like just physically can't hold that weight overhead, you need to get stronger. You know, and I think that's a big thing. And then for me, it would be the discomfort of being into that position means I'm not as confident, I don't drop under as low, and that's a mobility issue. So I would need to improve my mobility.
100%. Unless you're world class or like European level, you don't need to be specific to weightlifting.
Yeah, it's true of every sport. Like you should definitely be training the sport regularly. And this is another topic for another day, but this is the lie of sport-specific training. Sport-specific training is doing the sport. That's sport-specific training, and everything else outside of training should be getting better quality fitness, strength, mobility to then go do that sport. If you're stronger, faster, fitter, you will be a better weightlifter. Like that is going to happen. You're not at a stage where any tiny adjustment to your program is going to ruin your weightlifting, and you're definitely not even good enough at weightlifting yet.
100%.
You're definitely not good enough at weightlifting that it's going to matter. You need to be stronger, you need to be more mobile, you want to have good capacity and develop the skill. So you need to regularly be weightlifting, but don't just think, I'm a weightlifter, I'm a bodybuilder, I'm a powerlifter, so all I do is weightlift, powerlift or bodybuild, and then you lose the qualities in other areas, and you have that big muscly bodybuilder who is really unfit and really immobile, or the powerlifter that sits down for 20 minutes between sets because they're not fit enough. Like you should have all these other qualities so you can really focus in on that. And when you get to a certain level, yeah, sure, but I'll tell you what, you'll have a very, very good coach by the time you get to that level, I promise you.
We'll do an episode for you guys on sports-specific stuff, because we've got loads of little pet peeves and
for sure,
tips for how to improve your training for sport.
Yeah.
Which we've obviously covered a little bit for weightlifting.
Yeah.
So just to kind of sum up, if you are looking to improve your performance, biggest one, improve your knowledge of how to lift, whether that's through a coach, through resources on the internet. Go do a qualification yourself. Doesn't hurt just to have a basic understanding. Make sure whoever you are working with is someone that can express their coaching in a way that suits you.
Yeah, definitely. And
the relationship works. That's the biggest one.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to go and see that person once or twice a week. You don't want to hate them. You want to enjoy seeing them and working with them. Train weightlifting often. Yep. If you want to just do pure weightlifting, you can weightlift 4 or 5 times a week. If you're not going to do that and you want to do other things as well, at least twice a week would be great. But for either one you're going to do, if let's say you're training 5 days a week, you need to be doing other things like upper body work, lower body strength, general conditioning, core work. If you can't do push-ups and pull-ups, you probably should be able to. If you're going to rip a heavy barbell off the ground, you don't want your shoulders to dislocate. Likewise, if you can't do a plank for more than 30 seconds, you should probably be able to do that and fix that. because you're going to have to brace hard to squat heavy weight, to catch heavy weight overhead, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so like pretty good summary, but like look at those prerequisites, if I can say the word. You should probably be able to squat your body weight if you're gonna start, Olympic weightlifting regularly. You should probably be able to press at least, a third to half your body weight if you're going to be throwing a snatch overhead. Like that, you probably should be able to do that if you want to hold that. You probably should be able to get into the bottom of a squat position without needing to warm up too much. You should probably be able to sit in a full squat if you want to snatch into a full squat. Not taking the piss. You should probably be able to walk up the stairs without getting out of breath if you want to continuously weightlift with good skill.
Or run from the studio to the gym without getting out of breath.
Yeah. Like these are the things, like these basic prerequisites you should be looking at. You should be able to pull a deadlift that's probably 1.5 times your body, maybe a bit less, but and obviously this is dependent if you're female versus male, there'll be a bit of a difference, but generally, these prerequisites are good so you can really focus in your weightlifting sessions on the weightlifting rather than being like, I could do more but I'm not strong enough yet, I could do more but I'm not mobile enough yet. It would be better if you could just go in and just weightlift and improve your technique when you're weightlifting, and then when you get to the right time you're progressing at a normal rate rather than being held back by being too specific too early. So I think that's pretty good.
Yeah, I reckon let's wrap up there.
So thank you very much, guys, for mine and Jasper's first podcast together, and see you next time.
So guys, hopefully that episode will give you some insight on how to improve your performance when it comes to any Olympic lifting, whether you're just learning or whether you are trying to get better in your performance. I think iterating what they've said in the sense of getting a coach is really quite important. And just following some kind of program or something laid out specifically to you will always be something which is really helpful for you to do. If you do want to kind of get to know Jasper and Chris a little bit more, you can find them both on their Instagrams at the_symbiotic_chimp or at Jasper Schoolay. He's also got his education page, which is Beyond Weightlifting, but you can head to Jasper's Instagram and you can follow that and follow through to Beyond Weightlifting there. Again, if you want to get in contact with us through any means, probably through Instagram would be the best, either at Real Coaching Radio, at Mark Origin Series, or at Hack the Body, Hack the Mind. Any of those places through Instagram. Again, 5-star rating review, screenshot this, share it on your stories. I don't know, tell your mum, tell your nan, tell your friend, whoever needs to get better at Olympic weightlifting, let them know about this episode. Hopefully it helps. Thank you for listening once again, and we will see you on the next one.